Well, a huge thanks for that very kind introduction. I'm delighted to be with you today. I'm more delighted that I managed to find my way to the right room. I knew it was County Hall, but I don't know what I was thinking. I went along the riverbank, which was beautiful in the sunshine, found myself in the Paddington Bears section, was about to get a little bit distracted by the potential of a marmalade sandwich, but no, I've made it here, so it's a delight to be with you. I wanted to talk about three things in these opening remarks, and then I'm very much looking forward to the conversation to come. First, to talk to you about my own leadership journey. Second, to talk about progress since I finished being Australia's leader. And third, to make some remarks about the particular moment that we find ourselves in now. So first, my own leadership journey. Time is short, so I'm going to cut to the chase here very quickly. I didn't grow up imagining that I would be in politics or imagining that I would be a leader. I grew up in a household, an immigrant household. My family migrated from Wales in the UK to Australia. And I grew up in a household that valued education. Neither of my parents had been able to finish secondary school, so I grew up knowing that getting to go to something like university was a huge privilege. And when I did get there to university, there were some very big cutbacks from a Conservative government, which I thought undermined the right of kids like me to get a university education. And so I got involved in a student campaign to protest against those cutbacks, and we enjoyed some success. The government did change its mind on some, but not all of the cutbacks. And it was that moment that made me think that if you used your voice, if you had passion for a cause, that you could change your world. And that is what ultimately led me into politics. And so my reflections from that leadership journey is first and foremost, it is about purpose. It's about finding that sense of purpose inside yourself. What is it that you want your life to be about? And then pursuing that sense of purpose, no matter where it takes you. And second, it's definitely about perseverance, because along this pathway, I got more involved in the student movement at ever higher levels. I ended up being president of the Australian Union of Students. People started talking to me about going into politics. I decided that I would like to do it. And then the journey between me deciding and actually getting into the House of Representatives was measured in more than a decade. I stood many times for pre-selection for my political party. I stood for an election that I lost. It would have been easy in any of those moments to say this is too hard and I'm not going to keep pursuing this sense of purpose any longer. But I did persevere and ultimately got to where I wanted to be, which was into the House of Representatives, and that was the foundation stone for the rest of my political career. So perseverance really matters too, as does setting priorities when you get there. I distinctly remember the first day being Prime Minister and everybody wants you for everything. And in fact, everybody wanting you for everything did not relent for one moment during the course of my Prime Ministership. And as that kind of leader, it would have been possible to try and do as much of what you were wanted for as possible, to fall into bed absolutely exhausted at the end of the day, but to not have made any progress on the things that your sense of purpose drove you to do, the priorities that really mattered to you. And so it was absolutely pivotal for me to make sure that I manage my time even in these very difficult circumstances so that I could pursue the goals that I wanted to. And that did mean also setting time where I would do deep strategic reflection, where I wouldn't be responding to the minute-by-minute everyday demands, the media demands that come with high-level political office. And so if I can share with you a reflection from that time in my life, it is about being very ruthless about how you prioritise your time. It is truly the only non-renewable asset on the planet, your time. And if you fritter it, and we all know what those days feel like, where you go to bed absolutely exhausted and all you've done is wrestled with your inbox, then you will not have the progress on the things that you hold dearest. So priorities matter. Purpose, absolutely. Perseverance and priorities. What has happened in the time since I left office? Well, there's been some progress in the world, and there are some good things to reflect upon in that time period. One thing that I would definitely point out is that traditional media is much more respectful now of women in leadership positions than it used to be. When I look back at the treatment that I received, where almost every report seemed to start with talking about what I was wearing, where my family structure, the fact that I don't have children, was constantly remarked upon, where it was very easy for people to play on that psychological edge that research has laid bare for us now, that people easily conclude that strong women, women in leadership positions, are also nasty women. We only actually give women the permission to lead if they come across as both strong and kind, which is a fair old trick when you think about it. But my opponents intuitively realised that they would be able to put a frame around me of too ambitious, too ruthless, too unkind, and therefore distance me from the Australian people in their perception. I don't think people can pull tricks like that in the traditional media any longer. There has been too much work done since on exposing these psychological fault lines, in exposing the way that the media treat women, and in demanding better. I think Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign actually reshaped a lot of expectations around this because people could see how much gender was a thread. I think the Me Too movement, getting the conversations that we needed to have out in the open, of course that was about sexual abuse and sexual harassment, but I think it opened up far deeper conversations about feminism and women's treatment, broader conversations. I think post all of that, traditional media is much better than it used to be. However, and you knew that there was going to be a caveat here, didn't you? Whilst traditional media has got better, we have seen the rise of social media as the way in which most people get their information, particularly their political information. And even before the recent changes in social media companies, we all know, and the research tells us, that the online environment has been a toxic sewer for women. And even saying the online environment makes it sound like, you know, there's this stuff over here that is happening off our phones and digital devices, and there's this place over here which is called the real world. But these two things collide because if the online environment is so harsh to women, so many death threats, so many rape threats that women decide not to put themselves forward and run, that affects the real world. If, as does happen, some of these gross threats actually have photographs from the real world, and I've met women politicians who have had a death threat or a rape threat with a photo of their front door associated with the threat. That is a threat that goes beyond nasty words in the online environment and clearly troubles them about their own personal safety and the safety of their families. Now, I'd like to tell you that we're on our way to solving this problem, but the truth is we aren't, and the recent changes by social media companies are making matters worse. And we've got to, I think, in the face of that, ask ourselves when people talk about free speech, whose free speech, whose free engagement in the world are we really talking about? Because if we're creating that environment for women, then that's not freedom. Let me conclude my opening remarks by saying something about the world that we're living in now. Many of you will have followed day to day the big pushback against diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives, which has come out of the Trump administration but is now having reverberations around the world. And you may have been asking yourself, as I have, how did we get here? Where apparently DEI, it's 3 letters, but it's being treated as if it's some kind of 4-letter word, and you can't say it anymore. And I've got a couple of explanations for that I'd like to share with you, and then I want to share one piece of research before we commence the conversation. I think that we've ended up in this political position with DEI, firstly, and we've all got to deeply reflect on this, our narratives around DEI have not been inclusive enough of men. Diversity, equity and inclusion, however we meant it, has been heard as more for women or more for certain racial groups and less for others. Whereas we all know in this room that a more equitable world would be a better world for everyone. To give you just one example of that, research definitely shows that if men do occupations that are counter-stereotypical, they too have to jump a higher bar of competence to prove themselves. So a male nurse has to be more competent if people are going to accept him than nurses on average, in the same way that a woman CEO has to be more competent than male CEOs on average if she is going to be accepted. So a gender equal world would be better for everyone, and I think we need to be more inclusive in the narrative to overcome this political moment we're in now. Second, I also think that many organisations and businesses of great goodwill have spent time on DEI measures which were not impactful. The Global Institute for Women's Leadership, which I founded, has been sounding the alarm bell on this for years and saying that lots of what is being done is wasting people's time, and people don't like their time being wasted. And so I think we've got to get more thoughtful, more rigorous about what measures are being pursued so they are being pursued for impact. And then thirdly, and this is where I'd like to take you to the research. Let me see if I can make this work. They did say it was idiot-proof, just showing, of course. Oh, hang on, it's over here. Let me just peek my head here. Okay, there we go. We're definitely at the front. When they gave me this, I said, this looks idiot-proof. I was wrong. This is just a small subset of the polling research that the Global Institute for Women's Leadership released last week for International Women's Day. We work on this research with Ipsos, the global polling company. It's done globally in more than 30 countries. And the third thing that we need to think about, and what this research is about, is the attitudes of young men and the youngest generation, Gen Z, towards gender equality. So I'm just going to canter through this. You can see it all on our website. Question number 1, we ask whether people agree with this. I define myself as a feminist, and look at the gender split for the youngest people, the Gen Z cohort. Now, you would say men in that cohort are not underperforming generally on whether or not they think of themselves as feminist, but look at how many, the percentage of women who think of themselves as feminist, and the gender divide in our youngest generation, clearly causing tension, different expectations, and that will manifest in the workforce. And we know from last year's elections it's manifested politically, with women much more likely to put their vote with progressive political parties, and men, young men in particular, much more likely to put their vote with conservative and, in Europe's context, hard right political parties. Next, A man who stays home to look after his children is less of a man. And counterintuitively, the youngest men are more likely to agree with that statement than men my age. The complete reverse of what you would think. We all like to say to ourselves that the next generation is more progressive, more equal. They've been brought up with more understanding of equality. If a 70-year-old man or a 75-year-old man or an 80-year-old man doesn't get it, well, you know, they were socialised in a different age. We've got that wrong. This research is telling us we've got it wrong. The most conservative attitudes are disproportionately in the younger generation. Question 3, men are being expected to do too much to support gender equality. You can see the same trend line. Youngest men more likely to agree with that. And then finally, we have gone so far in promoting women's equality that we are discriminating against men. Once again, have a look at actually the youngest 2 cohorts, but particularly the youngest cohort. This is telling us that on gender equality, we are not winning the hearts and minds war. So if I can leave you with one message before we go to the conversation, I think this research is telling us, and this moment around DEI is telling us, we've got much to reflect on, some deep thinking to do. That doesn't mean that whilst we do that deep thinking, that we should give up on resistance to some of the anti-equality measures that are being pursued now. We need to resist, we need to reflect, and then to win the hearts and minds, we're going to need to rev up. And I hope that you do that, revving up alongside me. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you so much. Wow.
Thank you.
What an amazing, I think for me, what resonates, you know, the world we're living in, you're talking about the measures, especially now, what is happening globally. But for me, it is how are we accountable? How do we push ahead and still have the conversation? Because we have a moral obligation to society.
We do.
I think I love the purpose, perseverance, and priority, and I know that you are very clear on setting priorities and boundaries. And I think as women leaders, we need to do that. Often we're doing so many things, but we don't take care of the important things that matter and the things that we can actually physically change as well. And spend time doing that. And you talked about, you know, measuring impact. But I think for me, if you actually take the time setting those priorities, you can see the impact as well. I'd like to start with by asking you you talk about it, women often get advice to be more confident, to lean in. It's advice about them as individuals. How important is that compared to the changing structures we're seeing and the systems?
Yeah, I think for many women, they do like and feel that they benefit from going to conferences like this, events, having mentors who get them to think through a series of internal questions. And I certainly don't want to dissuade anybody in the room from doing that. I think, you know, working with coaches, with mentors, with sponsors, with those who can guide you is always a good process. However, I don't think we can then look at the world and say the reason that the world is unequal for women is because women don't have enough confidence. The research doesn't show that. The research actually shows that the reactions to women who are very, very confident are often reactions that are negative in a way that they are not to men. And it comes back to this psychological fault line in all of our minds where we expect men to be leading and commanding. We expect women to be nurturing and empathetic. If a woman comes across as confident, commanding, leading, it's easy for the gender stereotypes in the back of our brain to start whispering, she's probably pretty nasty, she's probably quite difficult to work with, she's probably a bit of, and I'll let you imagine the next word in that sentence, but I think you all know the word I'm thinking of, and it routinely gets used about women. And so we are only going to confront all of that not by internal work, but by exposing these stereotypes to the light. Because once you expose them to the light, I really don't think they can survive. And then second, and the research shows this very clearly too, and I think we all know it from our own lives, that so many of the structures in organisations, because they have been built in a time when work and achievement and ambition was disproportionately the province of men, they are still systems that work disproportionately for men. And we've been trying to retrofit those systems so that they work for women. The struggle around work and family life is one manifestation of that. But we've got to keep doing that so that this inbuilt bias in what we consider to be merit, how promotion systems work, how hiring systems work, how work and family flexibilities work. We've got to de-bias these systems so women are structurally on a level playing field.
Good. Wow, exposing those stereotypes, right, and fault lines too. But I think for me it is as well, so what are the most effective ways to engage men, right, as allies in this process? You know, in the fight for gender equality, this is a topic that has been very important to me in my own leadership journey. As you know, talking about some of these stuff that women have to, you have to work towards it. So what does that mean? For many other women in this room, right, that is facing the same challenge that I'm facing, and you too would have faced in your career and your lifetime, whether in your past, as Prime Minister and currently.
Look, my career relied on a number of significant mentors and sponsors who helped me on my way, and overwhelmingly they were men. Not entirely. The one who was sort of nearest and dearest to me was Joan Kerner, the first woman to lead the state of Victoria. But most of the people who supported, mentored, sponsored me were men. It's unsurprising. I was coming into a political party that we were changing from the inside, but we were changing from a political party that had overwhelmingly put men in parliament and had a fusion with a trade union movement that was disproportionately, at that stage, male-led. So I think men can be great allies for women individually. I think where we haven't quite got it right is to get men to be great allies for women collectively. And I think it comes back to this issue I raised about whether or not we've been inclusive enough in the events, engagement, narrative to ensure that men know that they are welcome in the room and that they too have a vested interest in this work on gender equality. I mean, at the Global Institute for Women's Leadership, we've taken to having events on International Men's Day the way we have events on International Women's Day. And when we started that, people were like, oh, why would you do that? Every day's Men's Day, all of the feminist slogans we're all very familiar with. And we said, because unless we are out there engaging, talking to men, then we're never going to, win through. And those events, the International Men's Day events, were the first time that I could look out on our Global Institute for Women's Leadership audience and see an audience which was disproportionately male. I don't have a pat answer. I think we've all got to be trialling it, but we definitely, in this period of time, need to be thinking about how to better bring men into the conversation and the process of change.
And I think you said this, bring men into the conversation, including events like this, to be part of the conversation, to become engaging, and to also understand some of the shared challenges that we face and how could they be part of the solution to this, or action-orientated, as you talk about. Julia, what really motivates you in terms of, you as a person, as you see we're doing all these events, what motivates you and says that these events that we're doing, like Lead with Her, yes, we know that men, but what motivates you around these things?
Well, it's that sense of purpose that I've had ever since my university days. When I was at university, worked out that this was not an equal world for women. My experience in high school in my family home had been one of a great deal of equality. But it was first at university that I was exposed to anything that looked like feminist thinking, and this is, well beyond the days that universities were offering gender studies or anything like that. But I worked out that this was an unequal world. And I figured to myself, this is so obvious, it's such a simple problem. It will be definitely solved by the time I'm in my 40s. I want to be one of the people that helps solve it. And then, job done. And then I got into my 40s and got a bit older, and then I was Prime Minister and the gendered attacks were everywhere. And here I am now in my 60s, and I'm like, where's my victory lap? Like after all these years as an active feminist, when do I get to, run around the track going, we did it, it's a gender equal world? And clearly the answer is not yet. Yes. So I'm still as passionate and enthusiastic to make sure that we get to a stage where we achieve that world. I might be way too old, or even maybe no longer here for a victory lap, but I do want women in the future to be able to do that victory lap.
I agree with that. But do you think we need more research or more action to bring effective change?
I think we need both, but we need continuing research. And one of the things when I was starting the Global Institute for Women's Leadership, people said to me, we know how to deal with gender inequality. We don't need a research institute on it. And I was like, I've had a look at the global research base and it's quite thin given how long we've been at the task of gender equality advocacy. And sure enough, the more research we did, the more we realised that it's more complicated than many people thought. And many of the things being done were not impactful. They weren't bringing change. In fact, some of them were entrenching negative attitudes. And so I do think, just like other areas of human endeavour, whether it's healthcare, whether it's how to best run your business, how to best deal with sustainability, we all understand that these things are moving works in progress, and things get done and things get learned, and then people do them better, things get done, things get learned. The same is true for gender equality, but we only do the learning if we've got the research and evidence happening, and then we only get that research into the hands of people who can use it if we have the advocacy.
Thank you. Good. And can we take 3 questions from the audience, Beth, for Julia?
Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Zhang from the Metaverse Institute. The United Nations highlighted that based on the current speed of progress, it will take another 300 years to achieve gender equality.
It's a long time to that victory lap.
Which is depressing. But on the other side, with the advancement of robots, I think Elon Musk said, by the time where we are achieving 10 billion population in the world by 2050, he predicts that every single one of us will have between 1 to 3 humanoid robots. So we're talking about up to 30 billion humanoid robots around us. And one of the key issues a lot of women are really struggling to go up their professional career is make a balance between having a baby, raising them, and maintain a balance with their future career. So my question is, do you think with the rise of humanoid robots, maybe in the future it is possible they can undertake a little bit free childcare for every single woman who are having ambition like you to become the next prime minister, the next Nobel Prize winner, or next Fortune 500 CEO? So what's your opinion about that?
Great question. I'd have to say I was always a big devotee of the Terminator movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I instinctively have the hairs on the back of my neck going up around robots, you know, John Connor, Rage Against the Machine, Skynet, Bring It Down. And I think Arnie's probably a little too old to save us all now. So I more seriously do think the age of AI is going to reshape so much, you know, from how we work, leisure, home. I do believe that it will change a lot of our world. What I'm less confident about is that this is all being designed thoughtfully. You will notice that part of the regression in global discourse and global cooperation between nations. Originally, people were talking about how do we work together as countries to regulate AI so it's for human benefit, not human detriment. Everybody appears to have given up on that now, and it's just AI for growth is the slogan. So I'm worried that we're not being thoughtful enough about how this is brought into the world. And when you look at who is designing this future, what you see is disproportionately men. And so, like other systems that have been designed disproportionately by men, sitting here, I don't have a high degree of confidence that these systems will be designed to meet women's needs. And so right now, I think the regulation question we need to address. We also need to address the workforce question. Who is at the forefront designing AI? Who's at the forefront of technology companies? Is it the sort of bro people that we saw sitting behind Donald Trump at his inauguration? Or is it a more inclusive vision? And, you know, that I think is immediately to play for in our world, and we do need to focus on it.
Good, thank you.
In my interventions as a director, I've never managed to convince people on the basis of values. I've definitely managed to convince people on the basis of value. And I understand what you're saying, coming at it from a leadership perspective, women's leadership perspective, but you're still playing that singling out game that you're proposing that we're trying to kind of dilute. How has the Global Institute of Women's Leadership tried to integrate women more seamlessly in the organization so that then D&I is not something fashionable that then gets killed by its own fashion, but actually something that integrates seamlessly in the organization, produces the value that the values are meant to deliver? Am I confusing you? Or
no, that's fine. That's a great question. And, you know, our view at the Global Institute for Women's Leadership has been that even as we pursue you know, equal opportunities for women for the highest levels of leadership, we need to have a lively dialogue about what we mean by leadership anyway. Because it's absolutely true that when you look at more grassroots levels, you disproportionately see women. And so we want to have that discussion, but we also believe that even as we pursue that discussion, we've got to have an impact in this world as it is structured now. And the reality of this world is politics, business, overwhelmingly these are pyramid structures where from a broad base people are funneled and funneled and funneled and only a limited number get through. And if you know, working with that reality our aim has been to make sure that from the first moment the youngest woman steps into any workplace, right through to the moment that she's CEO or chair of the board, that her journey has no barriers, that there's nothing that is stopping her coming through. No psychological stereotyping, no structural barriers, there's nothing that's stopping her coming through. And that means we do look at every level, and it means we've said to businesses these need to be mainstreamed programs because they're better for business, and there's lots of evidence around that, and they ultimately make better workplaces for everyone. There's lots of evidence, for example, work and family life flexibilities taken by all people make for a better business environment, but it's better for a dad who wants to take time off in the same way that it's better for a mum who wants to take time off. So, yeah, we take that approach. Thank you.
Good. No more questions. Can we do one last question? I'm sure I'm going to be in trouble.
Hi, Kim Hamer. Thank you, Julia. Great to hear from you again. I've seen a lot of you at the Global Institute for Women's Leadership, so thank you for your advocacy and your support and your passion. I have a question around intersectionality, actually. So here we're talking about gender equality and, bringing women to the table. There's a lot of other diversity challenges, inclusion challenges we need to be thinking about. So I'd really like your view on how that all looks and how we tackle one thing before the other, or how do we do it all together, or, what do you think?
Yeah, I do think we need to do it all together. A great friend of mine who worked for a global company, she's an African-American woman, she joked with me that in her global company, this is going back several years now, they unveiled with much razzmatazz the new board of the company, where they had appointed a number of women. So the board was now a third women, and they were all white women. And everybody was supposed to be celebrating this, and she said, she was very senior in the business, so she was able to raise these questions with the board. She said, look, this is all very well, but I don't see anybody sitting around this board table who looks like me. To which she was told, oh, don't worry, we're getting to race next. Where, of course, people don't come to work in bits. People come to work as whole human beings, and the evidence is very clear that stigma, prejudice compound. So in any analytical data we do when we're comparing the treatment of women in workplaces, we break that out. We compare the treatment of women of colour, and almost always the research will show you that race and gender have compounded in a way which has put extra forms of discrimination on the shoulders of those workers. So I think that's the way to do it, to be conscious of the intersectionality at every point, and then be making sure that we're informed by lived experience as we try and think our way through what are the best measures to overcome all barriers.
Thank you so much, Julia. I really resonated your pathway to leadership and the lessons learned. Especially about so much progress that you've made working with the Institute. And I think for me, it is around the environment. It is still our responsibility to take ownership. And how are we facing as leaders, looking at the current environment? And you talked about purpose, priority, and still getting ahead. So thank you so much. A big round of applause for Julia.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.